I'm Jim McDermott, and I represent the 7th Congressional District in the state of Washington, basically Seattle.
What is depleted uranium?
Well, nuclear power uses uranium, and what's left is called depleted uranium. That is, the energy's been taken out of it. So you have the waste products from the whole process of nuclear power. Depleted uranium, as we come to think of it, as it's used in war, is the metal that is taken from that and put into either the ends of bullets or the ends of shells or the armor plating for tanks. It is a particularly dense metal that has very, very powerful ability to penetrate through metal or to prevent shells from penetrating it. So it's a very useful commodity that came out of the waste products of the nuclear power energy.
How long has the U.S. military been using depleted uranium in any active combat situation?
I'm unaware of anything prior to the Gulf War of '91. That's the first time I became aware of it. I was asked by the Church Council in Seattle to go out and look at what had happened when the Kuwait War occurred and the United States drove the Iraqis back out of Kuwait and back into Iraq. But that's the first time that I was in contact with it and really became aware of the use of it as a munition.
What was your first impression of this on the battlefield?
Well, I saw it, I was first taken to hospitals in Basra, where I met pediatricians and obstetricians. The obstetrician said that there were so many children being born with malformations that the question that a mother asked when a baby was born was not, is it a boy or a girl, but is it normal? That was the common question they got from women as they delivered a child. Then there was also a pediatric hospital where there was they said was a 600% increase in the number of childhood leukemias, a markedly sharp increase in this childhood disease. And that's where they said they thought it was due to depleted uranium. And I didn't know yes or no. I mean, I'm a scientist, I'm a physician. And if somebody tells me something, then I'm going to try and find out if that's what really is doing it. Because if it is, well, then we ought to know about it and take steps one way or another.
What led you to propose the depleted uranium study amendment in 2005?
Well, you have to go back a little bit. I was a physician in the Vietnam War, and 68 to 70, I was a part of the medical units that were dealing with the war. And I heard people talk about Agent Orange, and people said, well, you know, just takes the leaves off the trees, don't worry about it. You take a bath, you get rid of it, it's no problem. But as time went on, from that point on, I had more and more contact with people who alleged that their symptoms, their kidney problems, and other things were related to Agent Orange. And I watched the military resist, looking into Agent Orange as a real cause for many problems. When I started to hear about depleted uranium, I thought to myself, you know, this is like deja vu all over again. I've seen this before, where the military doesn't want to admit that there is a problem. So I tried to figure out here in the Congress how to get the military to start looking at that. And I also went to the CDC trying to get people to start gathering data, because if you don't gather data, you can't make conclusions.
What was the outcome of the amendment? Was there a robust attempt to gather data after 2006?
I got the amendment passed. It required that there be a report in a year. The report came out and it's 2 pages. And it says we couldn't find anything. I mean, that's that.
That's that. In your mind, that wasn't a serious report.
Well, It reflected, in one sense it was, in that it reflected the fact there was no data. Nobody had been gathering data. And they didn't seriously go out and gather data before they wrote the report. They just said, we reviewed everything that's in the literature now, and there's nothing to suggest there's any connection, and so that's that. In science, you cannot make a conclusion from one case or two cases. You've got to do a study. Some people have it, some people don't have it. Then you see how they react to it. I was frustrated by their conclusions, but I could not say they were wrong. I just didn't know. Right. So then I went to the CDC and I said to them, this is something that Communicable Disease Organization ought to be able to look at this and see what's going on. And I mean, that's how we pick up things, is using the epidemiological studies that come from the CDC. And I was using that as my model in my head for how I wanted to figure out what was going on. We still haven't got any good hard evidence.
To your mind, the U.S. government just isn't and hasn't been really concerned with collecting official data on its own? I
find their lack of interest troublesome because there are really two populations you should be looking at here. You should be looking at the Iraqis who are living in it, and you should be looking at what happens to our soldiers and sailors and Marines who are involved in creating it and walking through it and living in it for a short period of time. Both of them are populations that ought to be subject to a study of what happens. And that's the troublesome thing, is that there's almost no interest in what happened to the Iraqi population. And the studies that are done about the military, I'm not comfortable with saying that they've done an adequate job. If you're looking for something, you've got to look where it is. And in blood and urine and bones and lymph glands, and you got to look through all these things, and you need to do a comprehensive study of this whole issue. And I can imagine about 20 years from now, we're going to be doing with this issue what we were doing with Agent Orange.
We spent time at Fallujah General, and part of our story is the doctors there. They're seeing a lot of child deformity cases growing and growing. Do you have any connection to whether the situation for the indigenous population there is getting any worse or any better?
This is an issue where you can push and push and push and not make any progress. So what I do is I wait until I see something in the newspaper or I see something in the scientific literature or something, and I grab it and try and push it another foot forward. I'm frustrated by our unwillingness to look at this seriously. There's enough anecdotal evidence and enough doctors walking around in Iraq. It should make your scientific mind be interested in figuring out what's really going on here. As a scientist, you never know enough. But if you see a cluster of things and then you say to yourself, there's something going on here. That's how modern epidemiology got started. It was a well in London where they had cholera all around the well. And somebody said, gee, maybe it's the water in the well that's causing cholera. We don't have any cholera over by that well, but we got it here.
Have you confronted anyone in the current administration, the Obama administration, about the issue? Do you have any general sense of their interest?
The Congress has been so dysfunctional over the last 4 years, it's been impossible to get anything done. Something like this, which is sensitive, something that the military is not very interested in, because they don't want to lose the weapon quality of depleted uranium. And to find out that it's bad for people is not something they want to discover. So it's hard to find allies in the military. And frankly, as we've withdrawn from Iraq, our interest in whatever happens to the Iraqi people, that has also markedly diminished. It is one of those issues that you have to get it when it's hot, and it's not hot anymore. It's really cooled way down.
Do you think maybe the issue is going to become a casualty of historical circumstance?
Well, if I'm right that there really is something there, it's going to come back up. Any scientist has to admit to himself or herself that when you look at something, you might be wrong. You have a theory under which you're operating, but you could be wrong, and I might be wrong, but I don't think so.
What does America do? What's the obligation?
Well, then you get to some really difficult things, like reparations. I mean, what do you have in response to cleaning up what you've done? Or did you just walk away and leave the mess you made? And I think that's a very difficult political question. I mean, we used these munitions in Bosnia, we used them in Iraq, we used them in Afghanistan. And my view is that people don't want to look, because if you find something, then you have to do something about it. And it's a lot harder if you've now identified there's a problem to walk away and say, well, it's not our problem, it's somebody else's problem. Let them figure it out. Never mind the human suffering and the illness and all the rest. It's the long-term costs of this kind of stuff that are really, they're very hard to quantify and therefore very hard to respond to.
Is this one of those you broke it, you buy it moments of the war?
Well, one could argue that. I mean, I'm sure some people say, well, we were doing what we thought was the right thing to do, and there was casualties. I mean, the whole collateral damage question is a very tough one to deal with. I personally think you have some responsibility for collateral damage. Look what we did in Europe after the Second World War. I mean, we'd spent all that money building Germany back up. We went in with the Marshall Plan and put it all back on its feet. Now you look at what we've done in Afghanistan and Iraq. We spent a lot of money, but we haven't put very much back up on its feet. Some will say, well, we already spent enough money on those people, so we're done with them. And my view is that, wait a minute, maybe it would have worked better if we'd have gotten them involved in helping us figure out how to do it. The long-term effects of war are the things that people never want to talk about. The flags and the bands that play when the soldiers go marching away everybody likes that part of war, but when Johnny comes marching home, that's the really tough part. It doesn't have much play at home. Where is Iraq? It's 7,000 miles from here, right? And so for most people, it's out of sight, out of mind. My district is the 7th district in the state of Washington, and that's what I care about. And if it doesn't affect my district, and I take a different view, I think of it as the United States, when we affect something in the world, we have a responsibility for what we've done.
From what you've seen, from what you know, do you believe that depleted uranium from U.S. munitions has been a health hazard in Iraq?
Well, from what I've seen and what I've heard from people, I'm very suspicious that depleted uranium is creating a health hazard for not only American soldiers who are exposed to it, but also to the Iraqi people. From what I've seen and what I've heard, I have to be suspicious. I can't ignore it.